Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lay.
2023 was another great year for the Rental Income Podcast. And every year at the end of the year, I like to look back and reflect on some of my favorite moments from the past year. And this year was tough. There were a lot of moments that I wanted to include in today's episode, but we just didn't have the time. So I narrowed it down to 4 shows. And these are episodes and moments in the episodes that I really think about a lot, that there are things that I think have been pretty impactful to me. So we're going to walk through it. And I think this will be a good refresher if maybe you've forgotten some of these things, or if you're brand new to the show, this is a great place to start. So what we'll do is we'll take a quick break. We'll thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll dive into these 4 clips from 2023. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property. And when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more, or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056.
Rental Income Podcast.
Our first clip comes from Scott Williams. Scott is buying really cheap houses, and he's profiting $30,000 a month on his portfolio. And on this clip, Scott talks about what he's buying.
Yeah, so I focus on the affordable housing niche. I like it for a variety of reasons, and it's worked really well for me. The first thing that I think is important with this type of housing is it's an easy barrier to entry. Typically, these properties are a lot cheaper to purchase versus maybe a higher class property. And for me, that was always a good starting point, because the hardest part of real estate investing is getting started. So having it be a lot less and more affordable to even purchase was something that allowed me to obviously start taking action and buying. But that's really the area I've been focusing on. I haven't skewed too far off of it.
So with affordable housing, so this isn't like a really bad neighborhood, right? Like what are the neighborhoods like?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I would say C class. So it's not terrible. I mean, I go to these properties, so I feel comfortable enough that, I'll stop by and see what's going on.
Okay.
You definitely run into some issues, but it's not like a war zone going on, anything like that.
Is there a certain type of property that you're buying?
So I really hone in on the price point is like, I know how much they can rent on a bedroom count. So I really am honing in on the property, the price of it, and really what it's going to take to get it to a point where I can rent it out for what I know I can rent it out.
All right. So give me a range, like say for your average rent, what are you looking at?
So I'm in a few different markets, so it really depends on the market. One of the markets I'm in, a 1-bedroom, let's say rents for about $900. I know I can rent it for about $800 to $900.
Okay.
A 2-bedroom, I know I can rent for $1,100 to $1,300, and then so on.
Okay. All right. So can you give us an example of a property that you bought, and then maybe what you had to put into it to get it ready to go?
Yeah. The latest property I bought was a 3-bedroom house. It had a tenant already in it. We did an inspection. It needed a little bit of work. This was a cash purchase. So I ended up paying, I think it was about $55,000, which is a great deal for a single family home. Mm-hmm. It's in the city of Columbia, South Carolina, which has a lot going on. And I know the neighborhood really well because I have properties all around it. I ended up purchasing it. A month later, the person living there moved out. We came in, put in about probably $5,000 to $8,000, including labor and parts. And I just rented it out for $1,525.
Nice. So, wow.
Great. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, how are you finding those deals? I hear from people all the time that they have a hard time finding deals. How are you finding deals like that?
Yeah, it's definitely gotten tougher to find good deals. What's worked well for me is I've identified a market that I really like. And so I, for example, have been buying in Columbia, South Carolina for the past 2 years. I've bought a lot of properties there. So the agents, the wholesalers, they know me. They know my track record. So they a lot of times will bring me deals before they post them. But, it took me some credibility and some time to get to that point. But I've picked off a lot of properties just on Zillow as well. So there's definitely deals out there. Now you have to just identify the market, I would say. Like, I own properties in Arizona, and those are not where I'd be buying right now because it's really expensive for what the rents are.
Okay, so you narrowed in on a market, and then once you have that market, so say for the example of Columbia, South Carolina, like you figured out that was an area that you wanted to invest in, and then did you drill down even further to look at specific neighborhoods that you like or parts of town?
Yeah, I mean, I do have properties there kind of all over, and I've gotten to learn the different areas. I'm really, at this point, I'm more centralizing the purchases in like a kind of a radius just to help with maintenance and my team to make it so they're not going so far out. But I really just look at, honestly, the price, because I know at the end of the day, the price that I purchased for is really what's going to make the money, cash flow. So it just so happens there's certain areas that are within that price range that I'm buying for.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I've just bought, a lot.
That was Scott Williams. If you want to go back and listen to that episode, it's episode number 430. And I'm going to have links to all of the episodes that we cover on the podcast today. If you want to go back and check it out later on, you can find them all at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 449. Up next is Marky Suazo. Marky bought a property that he thought was a duplex, but it turned out that it wasn't zoned that way.
Yeah, so if you walk this property, anyone would swear it's a duplex. It has the main entrance to walk inside of the building, a common area, and then each unit has separate entrances. And there were two separate tenants in each unit. One was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath on the first floor. And then the second and third floor was I believe 4-bedroom, 2-bath with its own separate entrance. And they each had separate back entrances to the outside, separate electricity meters. So it's separate HVAC systems. So this, for all intents and purposes, was a duplex. It's just, for whatever reason, there was never a certificate of occupancy on file. And it was zoned as a single family.
Now, I'm trying to think, how would I have dealt with this, or how could I avoid a similar problem that you've had to deal with? And I don't know, like, how you could have known that this wasn't legally a duplex, because it looks like a duplex. Looking back on it now, is there anything that you could have done before you bought the property to confirm that it was a duplex?
So I think on my part, what I would have done differently is I actually was able to find the zoning, that it was zoned as a single family prior to making the purchase. And when I discussed that with the realtor, they assured me, and they actually did follow through with this and having it zoned properly as a duplex, converting it from a single family to a duplex zoning. However, there was a separate thing, the certificate of occupancy, which was never on file, that I wasn't aware of. And it could, I believe through public record searching, it could have been found. In hindsight, I think I should have used that as an additional negotiating tool to readjust the price or altogether.
Totally. So is that something that if someone's buying a duplex, maybe just call the city and confirm the zoning? Can you confirm it as simply as calling somebody? Or is it something where you're going to have to look in the land records or have someone look in the land records for you?
You can do both. You can call the city and have them confirm, or you can find the zoning online yourself. It's a little bit of a cumbersome process, but it's certainly possible.
That's kind of scary. That's Marky Suazo from episode number 404. Up next is Blake Selby. When Blake decided he wanted to start buying rental properties, he decided he wanted a big portfolio. So he went out and he bought 300 properties. And once he got them, he kind of regretted his decision.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was getting hundreds of phone calls and texts a day. Just every single one of them was some kind of a problem that needed delegated. You know, I always was seemed to be understaffed, didn't have enough workers, didn't have enough money, didn't have enough X, Y, and Z. I was always short on resources. So I was trying to make a tightrope out of twine, and I did, but it was, the process to get there was not ideal. You
get the 300 units, and then when did you say, this is crazy, I can't keep this up?
Whole time?
Whole time. So then what happened? Like, how did you get the idea that, wow, like these things have appreciated, I could probably sell some of these off and pay off the others?
Yeah, I think the big moment was probably at the beginning of 20 when the house prices, of course COVID was there, but the house prices just shot up. I mean, it was stuff I was paying, it was going up 40%. I mean, it was just crazy. There were lines. We had lines out down the way when we were renting something. We had lines down the way, and it was just crazy to see the amount of interest and the demand for housing that had gone up. And a lot of these I bought in 16, 17. I mean, and I just saw this. I was like, wait a second, there's an exit play here. And I was getting really stressed out to the point where I just. With having millions in debt, which I had at the time, and having to do all this and trying to, squeeze blood out of a turnip, I said, it would be better for me to be a smaller fish and be healthy than to be as big of a fish as I was. So that's what I chose. I chose the healthier route, and I'm glad I did.
And what's funny is like you're still a big fish. I mean, having over 100 rentals, like that's still a huge portfolio.
Sure.
Like, so with all the debt that you had, like, was that stressful? Like just having millions of dollars in debt?
And I was lucky enough to get pretty low interest debt. I mean, most of my debt was under 6%.
Okay.
And so that was good. I think I was somewhere between like 3 and 6 on a lot of my debt. And so, I mean, we had some seller finance debt situations where it was, almost 0% interest. We went as sometimes no interest, which isn't, easy to come by. But, overall, the debt wasn't high interest, but, a lot of it had balloon dates on it. Right. And for those who don't know what that is, that's when you have to, that's a cutoff, that's a hard deadline that you have to pay it back by, or get a refi by. And if you don't do that, they can just, foreclose. Right. So. Yeah, it was some of my sold cash, some of my sold on terms, but I was able to get enough even when I didn't know what I was doing, I always bought low.
Okay.
I always made my money on the buy, and that's what saved me in the end. That was my salvation. If I had bought anywhere near market rate, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Okay. All right. So you were buying below market, and then when that appreciation hit in 2020, you just capitalized on that. And
absolutely,
and sold off.
So I was able to, unload them in groups. I think one was like a 34 pack, one was a 74 pack. I had another one that was like a 30 pack. And so by kind of moving them in packs, I was able to, kind of sell to landlords and other investors and keep the tenants without having to do mass evictions or anything like that. So, which that would have been not fun.
What about the taxes? Because I got to imagine that you with all the profit you're making, you probably got hit with a huge tax bill.
Massive.
Massive. Was that just painful?
It was. I did a 1031 exchange in like 2017, and I didn't really like it, to be honest, because it really just kicks the can down the road.
Right.
You're deferring the gain. You're not eliminating the gain, right? Yeah. Which is that for those who don't know what a 1031 is, basically it's called a like-kind exchange, and you have 90 days to identify a property and another 90 days to execute on the purchase of it. It's very complicated. It's not free to do. It costs money. So for me, and then it puts you in a bind where you're in this time crunch to find another asset that, maybe you wouldn't, or it wasn't that good of a deal anyways. You're just doing it to not pay the tax man. And quite honestly, I think it's better just sometimes just to pay the taxes. And then you know it's paid, you know it's done with. And I'm still paying 6-figure tax bills every year. And people are like, oh, I don't pay any taxes. If you don't pay any taxes, you're either Elon Musk or you don't know what you're doing, right? I mean, it's just, to me, it feels like, and I've read some really good books. Actually, on your website, you've got one of those, books, the Rich Dad Tax Advisors, you know what I mean, that you had listed. And I've read that book, and I have some books on how to pay very little taxes. But what I have seen is when you're having many cash events, I would call them cash events, right? Where you're buying low and you sell high and you take the cash. Okay, you're going to have some capital gains. Sure, you're going to pay some out. But when you're moving at that rapid of a clip, if your focus is on preventing taxes, I think you're thinking wrong. You need to get more cash events, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I'm going to pay hundreds of thousands this year in gains taxes just this year. And there's nothing I can do about it.
After Blake sold half his portfolio, he had enough money left over to pay off the other half and have over $1 million in the bank. So really great ending to his story. If you want to go back and listen to the whole thing, that was Blake Selby from episode number 438. Our next guest started buying rental properties, and he really didn't know what he was doing at first.
Mostly it was not understanding how to properly budget, not understanding what you should pay for a property if you want to make it a rental property, and not understanding about the rental game in terms of what to expect from leases and tenants, etc.
The other problem you had then was that you didn't really run the numbers. Or you didn't know how to run the numbers at the time. So did you just look at, okay, this is the rent I'm going to bring in, this is the mortgage payment, I should be good? Did you just not even account for repairs and vacancy?
Largely, I just purchased something that I could afford. As an owner-occupied unit, I looked at something that I could afford.
Okay, so this was a 3-unit building. You were living in one of the units, renting out the other 2?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, so let's take a look at some numbers here. So you paid $466,000 for this property. How much did you put down?
So 10%, so right around $47,000.
Okay. And then how much was your mortgage payment?
So mortgage all in was about $2,900.
Okay. And then how much were the rents for the other 2 units?
So the rents were $550 and $950, so a total of $1,500 for both of them.
Okay, $1,500, and then so you were just at a loss, but you're living there. So did you just kind of look at that as this is kind of an expensive rent that I'm paying to live here?
Exactly, Dan.
Okay.
A month later, I was on, these were month-to-month leases, so I lost both my tenants about a month after I moved in. So I lost that rental income. Then I realized the great world of utilities, and I had some massive utility expenses. And I had to deal with vacancy for a while I was doing some upgrades to try to bring rents up.
Wow. So, and did you have the money to cover that? Like from your job, did you have the money, or was that just a really tight time?
Yeah, so I did a couple things over time there. Number one is I fought for my property taxes to bring those down. As the entire market depreciated, we were able to bring, landlords were able to bring property taxes down. The other thing I did is I kept a good relationship with my bank. So at the right time, I requested a loan modification, and I was able to secure a loan modification that brought my interest rate down to 4%, which was great for the time, and extended it out for 10 years. And then over time, I was doing repairs and upgrades to the properties, and I was gradually start to bring my rents up.
And so how much are the rents today?
So today, I get a total of $43.25 out of the 3 units.
Okay, and how much is your mortgage payment today?
So with taxes, insurance, I'm probably looking at about $2,700.
Okay, so $2,700 versus $3,400 when you first bought it. So you've got $700 less in expenses, and then how much have the rents gone up since you first bought it?
On the first and second floor, my rents have probably gone up 50%. On the garden unit, they've probably gone up about 100%.
Okay, so this was a building that in 2006 was costing you a lot of money, but today, I mean, that sounds like a pretty good building. It sounds like it's making you some pretty good cash flow.
So today, this matches all the criteria of a well-established cash flowing rental unit. Like I said, it was my first, but 15 to 16 years later, after learning all the lessons, it now conforms with all the big hitting points of a profitable building.
Yeah, I mean, so would you say the big takeaway from this is that if you have a bad deal or you paid too much for a property, you just got to hang in there. And eventually the rents are going to go up. Hopefully you'll be able to refi and your mortgage payment's going to go down. And hopefully the property is going to appreciate over time.
Yeah, you're always going to win over time with real estate. Stay disciplined. Don't panic.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite sayings, and I'm a big believer in you're going to learn more from your mistakes than your successes.
I love a happy ending, and it just goes to show real estate can be very forgiving. You can make a lot of mistakes, and if you just let time go by, usually you're going to be bailed out, and that's exactly what happened to Andy. If you want to go back and listen to his full interview, it's episode number 413. And if you want to go back and look at any of the episodes that we played on today's episode, they're all at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 449. I'd like to thank Chaley Ridge for sponsoring today's episode. If you're looking to buy a rental property, whether you're just getting started or you want to add to your portfolio, reach out to Chaley. She's a nationwide lender. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something that'll work for you in your situation. If you want to find out more or you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley personally, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. I'll be back with a new interview on Tuesday. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.